Alright, so today we are starting the engine rebuild process. Step number one being to get the engine out of there. As you can see, I've kind of gotten started. Took the hood off, took this intake hose off, but really I haven't done anything yet. What I'm going to do is, for my own sake, every time I unbolt something or unplug something, I'm going to record a video of me doing it so I can watch it back when I'm putting it all back together. And then I'm just going to upload all that to YouTube anyways. So it's probably going to be a lot of just random unplugging and unscrewing. But it'll be fun. So, got the hood off and the intake hose off. That's steps number one. Now I just have to take everything else out. So, it'll be fun. The airbox here has this plug-in for the airflow sensor, and this hose to the air pump, and then just one big clamp holding this on to the throttle body. And this has, I think, just 2 bolts on it. And then there's one more hose just from the on top of the throttle thing here to the main air hose there. That's all the intake stuff off, and before I go anywhere else on this, I'm going to go ahead and jack it up, get all the oil and the coolant out of it so that I can undo all these hoses, and then I can get this shroud off, and then from there it'll be a lot easier. This is pretty interesting. The coolant, you can't really see that, the coolant drain plug for the engine block is right above the motor mounts. It's just about done draining now, but it kind of just makes a giant mess. So shout out to the Mazda engineers for that one. Once the engine block coolant finishes draining, you can also drain the radiator. There's a little Phillips head drain screw on the bottom of that. The geniuses over at Mazda also decided to make the radiator drain screw out of plastic, and that stripped immediately. Seems like that's a pretty common problem, so I'm just going to have to drill that out and buy a new one, I guess. So that's fun too. And then, see, there's this hose, a hose down here, and then this hose doesn't go to the engine. It actually runs into the chassis. And then you have this hose as well, which is the overflow, which just runs straight to the tank back here. So that one's pretty easy to just remove like that. Turns out getting the radiator shroud off was a little easier with the battery tray removed, so we got that off too. And then this is what we're dealing with here, just a bunch of coolant since I couldn't drain this thing, which is great. But yeah, so we're going to, I think it's just 4 bolts, 2 on each side here. That'll get the radiator out, and then we will drain it by just tipping it over. There's also this one little barrel connection that goes into this thing on top of the radiator. I'm guessing that's some sort of sensor. This one's all janky anyways, so I'll have to figure out how to redo that correctly. Yeah, this radiator is kind of janky anyways. There's a large chunk of something that's just hard and solid on there, and like half the fins are bent. So yeah, I'll probably look around for a new radiator anyways, especially since that screw's all busted. It'd be easier just to get a new one, so I'll have to see if I can find a cheap one. While we're on the subject of fluids, another thing you want to do is undo the fuel lines. There's one right there. This is all aftermarket stuff, but this fuel line goes to the injectors there. And let's see, got those two. And that should do it for that. Also, there's this cheeky little hose here that goes down and clamps like all the way underneath there, so it'd be easier to remove it up on this side. There's also another fuel hose that attaches to the chassis right. Is that a fuel hose? I think it is. Yeah, right here. That should be... No? The fuck is it? I don't know what that is, but it's a hose. I'm pretty sure it's a fuel hose. No, I don't think it is. Looks like it goes, yeah, to the brake booster. Beats me. Alright, so now we're actually getting somewhere here. We got plenty of space to work with now that all the radiator and shroud stuff's gone. Minor mess of coolant, but that's fine. It seems to me like this whole process is going to be easier if we go ahead and remove the entire upper intake manifold from right here just up, because there's a lot of wires that run under that. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that. Alright, so if memory serves, to remove this top part, you got the injection wires here. You have these two hoses here, which I'll label for the upper intake manifold. These two hoses here, both those sets of hoses just run to somewhere else on the engine block, so those will get removed later too. This is, I believe, a coolant hose right here. And then that's the bolts on there, obviously. Then you have these just connections here. This is for the throttle position sensor. All this connects to the lower intake manifold, so we won't worry about that. Alright, and then on the other side here, we have a connection here, which I believe is the engine temp sensor, or intake temp sensor, sorry. We have this electrical connection to whatever this thing is here. Who knows what that does? This connection for the, what's that called? Air control valve? Idle air control valve? Something like that. And then, let's see here, the throttle cable. I think I said that already, but I haven't taken it out yet. Then you have these two hoses back here that run down to somewhere else on the engine block. And then this is a coolant hose right here, so undo that as well. And then there's two bolts there. You have to take off this plate to get to them. And then there's one here, and then 5 bolts that are right there on the manifold on the other side. And once you get all that stuff out, you can take the whole top half off. So I'll do that now. Also, side note, if you have an OMP, which I do not, there is this little bar that connects to these throttle linkages here that goes down all the way through there down to the OMP. But I don't have that, but there would be a little bar attached to there that would move up and down with that. I also just realized that this whole throttle cable linkage was all very loose anyways, so I'll have to make sure to actually tighten that next time. Failed to mention one more hose right underneath the air control valve here. So yeah. And the cool thing about these 3 bolts that hold the entire thing down up here is that you can just loosen them and leave them in there, which is very nice, which is 3 less bolts to keep track of, because they'll just stay in there and this whole thing will lift off, if that makes sense. Another thing I didn't mention is if you're taking off this entire upper part separately, you want to undo this fuel hose too. So this is what it looks like without the whole upper intake manifold off. Looks like it was necessary because there's mounting points and such back here. And you have to unplug all this stuff and get this wiring harness out of here. So, good progress. Alright, so starting with this electrical crap, we'll start down here and we'll just make our way down the harness here. You got these two guys right here, which are black and white respectively, which is pretty easy. No idea what that plugs into. Let's see here. You have the 2 fuel injectors down here, which are pretty easy to undo, and it's pretty obvious to tell that they are the fuel injectors. Might be a little difficult to say which is which, but you kind of just, I can memorize this shape here. The one that bends around is the one on the right. The one that goes straight down is the one on the left. Got this connection here, which I had to remake. This is for the O2 sensor, which is right down here on the exhaust. You also have this connection, which goes right under the alternator here. If I can get that off. And then that's all the end of it. Then you have this ground screw right here. You also have this connection right here on the back of the alternator, as well as this This is super janky, I know. I'm going to get that fixed one day, but this just goes right back to the back of the alternator. This top screw stripped, and this was a temporary fix for that. Coming over to this side, not all of this is connected to that same harness as before, but we have the oil pressure sensor right down here. Just slides off nice and easy. That goes to this other harness down here. You have these two connections, which go to something. I'll get those when I have a free hand. You got this for the crank angle position sensor, which, remember, this thing was a pain in the ass to get off because it's a really confusing mechanism, so I'll get that when I have a free hand as well. You then have, let's see, these two connections right here, which come off pretty easily. Blue is on the left, yellow is on the right when looking at it from the driver's side. And same with these here, gray on the left, orange on the right. If I can get that. Sorry, can't remember. I wasn't paying attention if I was actually showing that on camera. But blue, yellow to these two spots, and then gray, orange to those two. You also have this single connection right here with the yellow cable, which plugs in just right underneath the fuel filter next to the oil pressure sensor. So it looks like this entire assembly thing, I'll call it a rat's nest for now, looks like that all comes out. There's three 12mm bolts holding that on, including one that's just on this post here. And that'll just let me take all that off, make it a lot easier to remove this wiring harness instead of trying to snake it back through. You do have to take off this fuel hose, though, to the fuel lines to get that off. But after that, all this should come off. I actually lied. I've been trying to get this thing off for a while. It turns out there's one more bolt. Little sneaky guy right there under where the gasket is for the upper intake manifold. If this thing will focus. There we go. But yeah, one more bolt, and then get that hose off, and then it's off. I tried and failed to get that hose off, so I just took it off all as one unit. That's sitting on the shelf over there. But this is what we're dealing with without it. As you can see, it looks a lot better. I mean, most of those hoses and stuff are plugged up anyways. I'm going to research what those big connections do, these colored ones here. I bet it's all just emission stuff. I want to have as little as I can going on in the engine bay here, of course, but I do still want to pass emissions. I want to keep it all mostly stock. So I'll have to see what I can get away with, because like you can get away with an EGR block-off plate like that there, and you'll still pass emissions, but I'll have to do some research on the other stuff, because it'd be nice to just get rid of all that and have this all very simple here. But now we got this entire wiring harness free. Mostly. Still need to undo this guy here, but that's not connected to this. So yeah, and that is, aside from those, dropped a screwdriver, aside from those two connections down there, that is most, if not all of the electronics plugged into this engine. So we'll go ahead and get those unplugged. Also, side note, since I missed it, on the oil fill post thing, you can kind of see that hose right there. It's just branching off of it. Looks like it goes onto, zoom out here, that guy right there. That's leaking oil out of it, so I'm assuming that's where it goes on the rat's nest here. Yeah, here is all of that wiring harness we just undid. Good news is it's pretty simple. Everything on here plugs into something except for this guy. I'll look at the wiring diagram, see what this does, because it's probably supposed to go somewhere. I'd imagine, maybe onto the alternator here somewhere. I'm not sure. I'm sure not having that plugged in might be causing issues. We'll see about that one, though. But yeah, everything on here goes somewhere, so it's going to be pretty easy to get that all put back together. And yeah, the engine looks awesome like this. I'm a really big fan of the minimalist kind of look and just how tiny these rotary engines are, because they are really small. Before I get to the exhaust and doing all the transmission stuff, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the stuff on the front of the engine here. Went ahead and got most of the belts off. I'm going to take this alternator off, and let's see, I believe there are 5 bolts holding this entire power steering assembly on. So I'll try to get those off. I might get these lines off. We'll see what'll work best for that. And then there are 5 bolts. You can see 4 of them down there. There's one just above that one on the left there too. And then that should be able to get the whole power steering pump off. There actually is one, well, I guess 2 electrical connections from the power steering pump, so gotta undo these as well. So this hose was not coming off no matter what I did. It shit seems like it's super glued on there or something. So I went ahead and put these hoses back on since they were leaking all over the place. And I just kind of took it off and set it to the side here and wired it up to the side, which should give enough room for getting the engine out here. Might just have to be careful not to smack it into that. But yeah, this hose was not coming off. Alright, so with the fuel pump to the side, you want to undo the oil cooler lines. There's one running to the back of the engine right there. The wrench is on it. A little hard to see. And then one running to the front right there. Alright, so I got these oil lines off here. Looks like those can just be pushed off to the side when you pull the engine out. So we'll just kind of keep these to the side here. There are these 2 connections that are tied to the oil cooler lines right down here, which are unplugged already, but they're also plugged into the engine block and just zip tied to the lines here. So I'm just going to cut that zip tie and remove it all as one thing, and then I'll worry about these lines later. Let's see, so on this side, what's left, there's a bracket there. You see that bolt that's just holding this wiring harness on, looks like. And then this hose right here, which runs into the firewall. So undo the 2 of those, and then I believe that's it. There's a ground back here that's on the transmission side, which I'm failing to get on camera. Yeah, I don't think you can see it. So might have to undo that when we're taking it out, but that'll be a step for when we're dealing with the transmission. Alright, so looks like everything's undone over there except for that one transmission ground connector. Because I don't know if I'm pulling the entire thing out with the transmission or just the engine, and then I'll drop the transmission later. I'm going to think about what's the best way to do that, because there's a lot of stuff connecting to the transmission, and it might be easier just to take it out in steps. Maybe I can put it all back in as one unit. We'll see about that. And then this hose for the split valve, I think that runs to the cat from the air pump for emission stuff. It also keeps your cat from overheating, so I'll keep that in there. Have to undo that hose. And then this interestingly bent hose here goes to the exhaust. I think it's like a pressure thing. I don't know, that's beyond me. But this hose, that hose. Alright, well, I decided to take the engine out and then take the transmission out later, since I want to get this engine rebuild going pretty soon, and I'll need something to do while I'm waiting for parts. So for now, though, I'm just draining out the transmission fluid. If you've never smelled gear oil before, it's probably the best smell ever. So while I'm down here, though, got that drained. We want to get this exhaust off, disconnected from the engine. I've read it's best to take it out all kind of as one unit, so I'm just going to leave the headers on there and disconnect it right here. It's kind of hard to see because it's cramped down here. That's the oil pan. That's the headers under that heat shield, and that's the exhaust. So that, and then the starter, take that out as well. And then from there, just disconnects the engine block itself from the transmission, and then it should be all ready to pull out. There's 3 engine mount bolts right down here, and then there's 3 on the other sides, on the side of the engine instead of the bottom. And then, yeah. So, hopefully that goes smoothly. Also, I think I mentioned this bolt earlier. I undid it from the top and then it was just spinning freely and I wasn't sure why. Once I got to the alternator, I realized you have to hold that still on the other end, and that's actually just the bolt that's holding the alternator on. So, the more you know. One thing I'm definitely looking forward to when getting all these pieces out is getting them all cleaned. You can see that there. It's like the one clean part of this entire transmission, but it's so nice and shiny. So it'll be sick once the entire thing looks like that. All right, so we got the exhaust unbolted and the starter unbolted. I used some baling wire just to prop each of those up so they're not just sitting on the ground. And see, all that's left now is 3 bolts on the underside of the engine next to the oil pan for the mount on this side. Only 1 bolt on the side of the engine for the mount on that side, and then 5 bolts on the transmission that are holding it to the engine block. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower the car, put a jack with some wood to prop up the transmission. Then I'm going to attach this jack stand, make sure there's no slack in the cables. Then I'm going to go underneath and undo the 3 transmission bolts, the one on the side there, and then the 3 mount bolts, sorry, and then the 5 transmission bolts. And then we are going to slowly lift this thing out of here, make sure that nothing's still connected in there. Everything appears to be good from the top and the bottom here. So I think it should be fine. But yeah, we'll go ahead and unbolt those, then we will get things attached, see if we can get it out of there. Alright, so one thing to note is also, at least on my car, the engine hoist point back here it's bolted through the transmission. So that has to be undone. Yeah, I'll have to figure that out. But that's loosened. Unfortunately though, when that broke loose, my arm flew back and it broke the fuel pressure sensor clean off. This is just a cheap thing anyways. I'm sure I can find a replacement that just bolts onto that, but it kind of sucks. One more part I have to get. Not too bad though. It's kind of low on the priority list, but yep, another thing I have to do. That's really annoying because if you're trying to take the engine out without the transmission, then that kind of removes this jack point here. Luckily, one of the power steering pump bolts was the same thread pitch and all that. So I put on the nut that was holding it on here as a spacer, and I threaded that in, so this should be good enough. It doesn't reach all the way through to the transmission, so it's still separate there. But that definitely is an annoying way to do that, because you have to do some kind of janky to make it work. Also, this engine ground cable here was screwed in right behind that, which I just saw, so went ahead and took that out too. So all the transmission bolts are out, everything's disconnected, it's all jacked up. You can see it's kind of separating there. You just need to get it to pop off. Alright, so I forgot to record most of it because I was busy doing it. But here is the engine. It is finally out of the car, which I am very excited about. It was a kind of a process getting it out of there, but I'm sure it'll go back on just as difficult. So that's something to look forward to. Yeah, looking pretty good. I don't know. I'm just really happy to have it out of the car. It's really fun to look at as well. A lot of it is very dirty, which is to be expected. A little rusty and such. I'm looking forward to cleaning all this off, giving it a nice deep clean. But yeah, here is the engine bay, engineless. Very open and empty. Could fit like 2 people in there. I don't know. The inside of the transmission bell is absolutely caked in oil and grease and stuff, so that's exciting. Something I guess I'll take a look at, but I'm sure it's probably just oil leaking somewhere. It might be transmission fluid, because that's definitely very greasy in there. My hands are covered in grease. But this is probably something we want to do anyways, is the throw out bearing there. So that'll be nice to do. Still oil leaking out of the oil cooler lines into the starter, which is fun. But yeah, very open in there. Before I put anything in, I'm going to go through and clean the entire engine bay, which will be fun. One thing you'll notice here is that this is where the one of the engine mounts should be. You can see that's where the other one is. And that, let's see, that's just right here. That just sheared off completely when I was trying to take the engine out. I undid these bolts and then I dropped the engine back down like an inch, which I think put a lot of pressure on the inside of that. But also, these engine mounts are just very old and not doing too good anyways, so I planned on replacing those anyways. But yeah, so it's pretty cool looking at it there. And yeah, there is all the engine stuff out. Next step in the whole rebuild process is going to be disassembling this entire thing, which will be fun, I think. It'll definitely be more fun than it was getting it out of there, I think, because I don't have to be covered in grease climbing under the car all the time. So yeah, that'll be the next episode, is disassembling this guy. And then the episode after that's probably going to be rebuilding it. Then the episode after that's probably going to be putting it back in the car. So that's what you have to look forward to from the YouTube channel here. But yeah, good stuff. I am very excited to have it out of the car.